What is up everyone? Welcome to my networking video. This is part 2 of my networking series. Now, as you guys know, my office is a work in progress. Since the last networking video, it's changed one hell of a lot, and you guys can see all of this progress in the office build series. If you haven't checked that out, go and check it out. It's great fun. As you can see, I've still got a long way to go, mainly with cabling and power distribution and things along the bottom of the desk there, and the setup and everything. But this video is going to be all about the network. So let's move you guys over. And I want to show you, first of all, that blue light on the router. That means that I have internet, which is fantastic. So everything that we set up in the last video, the power line adapters, the new master socket, the big Cat 6 cable coming up to the office, the switch, and basically everything that we did is working fantastically, including the Airport Extreme as the wireless access point. Everything is absolutely fantastic. So part 1 was truly a success, and I'm very happy with it all. But I do have one little change that I'm going to go over before we start getting into the new stuff in part 2. This is my UPS, and as you can probably tell, it has been pulled out of use. The only reason that it's been pulled out of use is because, well, the bottom line is I'm going to sell this unit. I can't believe I'm saying that because I bought it ages and ages ago. It was one of the first things that I bought for my new office, and I made a video about it. I've been excited to use it, and I've had to put up with lugging it around and storing it. This humongous, multiple tens of kilogram weight for like ages and ages since I bought it, all the way back last summer I think I bought it. But it is too deep for my rack. Now, I knew from looking at the measurements, I knew that it was going to be too deep for the rack. It didn't come as a shock. However, due to the design of the rack, I wasn't 100% sure how I could achieve what I was going to achieve, but it turns out that having the UPS hanging out the back of the rack is pretty much an impossibility due to the way the rack is designed. And to be perfectly honest, folks, I'm really glad about that. The rack is about 10 times nicer than I thought it was going to be. It really does look the part. And to have this with its arse and cables hanging out the back, I think it would look terrible. So this big lump has got to go, and I've got to replace it with a smaller model that isn't as deep. So this will be on eBay ASAP, but if anyone is interested in this and you're in the UK, feel free to send me an email, because I will be selling this for a very good price. I'm looking at roughly £100, give or take some postage here and there. But yeah, you know, starting with a rough figure of around 100 quid, and I've also got another battery for it. There's 4 cells in that battery sled, and I've got another battery sled with 2 cells. All of the batteries are sort of used, but there's plenty of life left in all of them as far as I know. I've never had any hiccups with it during testing. But that is it for the UPS. I am now on the market for a much smaller unit, maybe a Smart UPS 1000 or something like that, something that isn't as long. So there's absolutely no point teasing it any longer. There is my new rack. Now, it arrived on a pallet. I had absolutely no idea that it was going to arrive on a pallet. It is massive, and it is heavy, but boy, it is seriously nice. It is much nicer than I thought it was going to be. And I also got about £70 off of it. For a chance, just chancing it, I made an offer on eBay that was way cheaper than the asking price, and it was already on sale, and I won it. It was the last one of this particular configuration. They've probably got more, but that's it for the auction. So I am so pleased with this rack. Just one of the best purchases for the room so far. So this is an SJB rack. You can find them on Amazon and eBay. I believe this is a 16U or a 15U model, which is going to be tons of space for me for a very long time. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at this rack and some of the advantages. So as you guys can see, it's got a really nice wooden top. It introduces some colour to the setup, which is really nice. And there is tons of space up here for my printer, and probably some more bits and bobs that I can stick up there soon. The other really cool thing about this rack is it was totally unplanned, but the depth is identical to my test bench. So it's totally 100% the same depth but as you guys can see, it is a little bit higher, which I wasn't expecting. Not that I did any measurements, because I sort of wing it in that way. In the last video I was talking about having the rack underneath the test bench, but I am so glad that I'm not having the rack underneath anymore, because this has worked out much better. I've rejigged quite a lot in the office in terms of where I'm putting the furniture, and this is a much better placement for the rack. So as you guys can see, nice solid wooden top, it's really cool, and this is pushed to the point where there is space for the power line adapter behind it with a socket plugged into it. So the test bench is pretty much lining up with this, and this is now the finalized position, although I will be pulling it in and out to obviously wire it up and install all of the equipment. So one thing I want to do is show you guys the internals while I still have the rack empty, just so that you can see sort of all of the little details that sort of add up and make this rack really cool and such good value, because the features are just unbelievable for the price. Now the door is reversible. I've already reversed the door because it was opening the other way, but obviously it's against the wall that way, so this is the way that I want the door to be opening. We have 2 included keys with this rack, which is handy, but of course, you know, this isn't a public place or whatever, so unless I go away on holiday or something, this key will pretty much always stay in there, just acting as more of a handle really. So it unlocks, and then of course it opens. Now the door is sort of a smoked colour, so it's slightly darker. It's still enough for you to see the LEDs, but if you do have any bright LEDs in there, they will be nicely dampened by the door. As you can hopefully see there, the difference in colour with my hand as I put it behind the glass. It's a really nice smoked clear glass. So inside, ignoring this is my raid that I've put in there, just out of the way for now. You guys can see that we have, all in all, 2 sets of rack strips. So we've got the set at the front, which is pretty much a given. It wouldn't be a rack without that. But we also have a set at the back, which is extremely handy. Now this effectively, for thinner equipment, gives you double the amount of space, because for things like power strips and patch panels, or cooling fans that are mounted in rack panels, that can all go back here so that it's not taking up the main space at the front, which is sweet. Now another cool thing that you may not be able to tell on camera at this moment in time is these rails are actually adjustable back and forth. Both the front and the back can be moved closer and further back. So of course right now the rails are quite far back, you can see a huge gap here, so I will be moving them closer, but I want them with enough space to obviously have a switch mounted in the front and Ethernet cables to comfortably come out with a switch and go back behind. So it'll be forward a little more, but not too much more. So this brings me on to my next topic, and that is the depth of this rack. Now leaving measurements out of the equation for a second, we'll go into more depth when we start to mount equipment. This is not a server rack in the sense that you'll be mounting big, heavy-duty, long servers in here. Any 1U or 2U Dell PowerEdge server or an X-Serve or anything like that would not fit in this rack. This rack is technically what I believe they call a data equipment rack, which is more designed around, as I was describing, switches, patch panels, that sort of thing. Anything that you need to keep in a rack that isn't the main server rack, which is of course going to be much deeper, which would kind of suck for my office because A, I don't use any rack mount servers, and B, that would take up way more space and you can't get them in such a nice finished design like this. This looks like a piece of furniture that belongs in your home, even though it's a rack, which is fantastic. So you can't mount deep things in here. This is one thing to consider. But for me, it's ideal because this piece of equipment in here, bar the UPS of course, but this piece of equipment is the deepest I have, and it fits in there with ease, and it'll fit in there even better once I move the rack strips forward a little and get everything lined up exactly how I want it. So the depth isn't there for crazy server racks, but for me that's ideal. This is the deepest thing that I have, like I said, and everything else is going to be pretty much stuff on shelves, or the rack mount switch, power distribution, a smaller UPS, and all sorts of goodies that we'll be putting in here. So, other little features, I'm going to get the camera in closer, just so that you guys can see everything. So starting at the bottom, you guys can see these bolts, one here and one here. It's the same in the back. They're pretty much holding feet onto the bottom. This server rack came with a couple of different feet options, but I have the plastic cups in place so that it slides across my laminate flooring with ease. You can also get casters that fit into these, but I didn't want those for obvious reasons. I don't want to be wheeling this rack around my office. You can see here in this shot as well, you can closely see that there are rails along here in order to move the rack strips back and forth, like I was saying, so you can literally bring them right close to the front, which is fantastic. If you're mounting all gear that's flush to the front of the rack, then that's perfect. So coming up a little, you guys can see what looks to me to be maybe around a 90mm fan grill, or maybe a little more than that, I'm not too sure. But there's a fan grill there in case you wanted to install a fan. They do sell kits for powering the fans and the fans themselves and mounting them and all sorts from the same company, but I got the bare basic rack with no fan. If I need to add one in the future, I will. It's kind of at this point unlikely, because when I knock out the holes for cables, with all the cooling that the equipment has inside of the rack anyway, it's likely that it will be able to cool itself with quite a lot of high pressure within the rack itself. However, if temperatures are too high and the equipment gets too noisy, I can really easily install a nice quiet fan in the bottom there and power it up and get some nice cool air into the bottom there. There is also one at the top, but it's more of just a mount, because of course with the top, with the wooden lid here, you guys can see that, yeah, you wouldn't really be drawing in much air, but you'd get a little bit of air from the creases around the back where the rack is built. So the only other feature worth pointing out really is at the back you can see those knockout panels. Now that's what we're going to be inspecting next. I'm not too sure how they knock out, whether they just push out, I'm not too sure, but I believe I'm going to push out the majority of those panels to run cables. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 there, as well as 3 at the top, so that's for the cable management. And you guys can now see why I do not want to put a piece of equipment in here that is too deep for the rack. The back of the rack, although it is removable, you have to take the whole thing apart. You can take the back panel off, I believe. That's not something I want to do, because with the UPS hanging out the back, that pretty much defeats the object of the nicely enclosed rack with the reduced noise and everything. And these cable management holes are so generous and so convenient that I would love to have the back panel installed. So I pretty much have to get a smaller UPS. Other than that, folks, you can see a little earth lead there, which is common. They basically, all this equipment is earthed, but this is a metal casing, so it just keeps the continuity of the ground around this, because of course once the door is closed and all your equipment is racked up, this in itself, the rack in itself, is basically one giant piece of equipment working in harmony, and it's metal casing, so it's kind of important to have it earthed. So yeah, that is that, and I believe that is everything, folks. That is everything. So let's drag the rack out and take a little look at how we push out those panels and route our cables, because I'm very interested to see that. So one thing that's difficult to grasp in video is general size and context of larger equipment. So what I'm going to try and do now is demo to you guys how easy it's going to be to pull out the rack and to work on it. So it's tight in between the wall and the test bench at the moment. So I can just grab it on its sliding feet, pull it out past the test bench, turn it round, and I have a lovely amount of space both in front and behind. So looking at these panels, guys, this is the back, by the way, on the outside, as you can see. Looking at these panels, they are literally just cutouts that haven't been completely cut out. They've got tabs holding them on. So I'm going to take out all of them, the 3 here, the 3 here, down the bottom here, and the 3 actually on the bottom possibly, or I may leave those in for now because this may be enough. But yeah, I'm going to take all these out because there's no way that I'm going to need any of them in there, and you can't see the back anyway, so I don't mind having open space. And that is with a little bit of bending in that Ethernet cable there. I'm going to have to take a look at that. But that is the temporary solution, and the rack goes right up against that when there's a plug plugged in to that power line adapter. So the idea is to cable up everything with enough slack so that the rack can be pulled out of its position like this. So as you guys can see, I've taken out 2 panels either side and 2 panels either side. I thought to myself while I was taking them out that there's loads of space for cables, so I'm not going to take the middle one out, and it'll help a little bit as well because the back metal is a bit sort of bendy. So next up in line now is to line up my rack strips and where I want them, how far away I want them from the door. Now each of them are separate at the moment, they're not joined, but all I have to do to join them, to make sure that they're both going in the same place, is slot a bit of relatively strong-ish rack equipment in the middle, and for that I'm just going to install my switch, because that way I can then also test when they're too close to the door for an Ethernet cable to be in the way, if that made any sense. So I have got some... Let's just show one example here. Here are the 3 total components for one rack fixing. I've got all of mine in black because normally I do audio gear and most of the cases and stuff are black. Maybe silver would look better for this, but as long as they're all the same colour, I don't mind. I'm kind of fussy about that sort of thing, and one thing that'll make this process a bit longer, for me at least, is I'm going to have to wait for funds to allow me to buy all the things that I want to buy for this rack. And I'm not even talking equipment, I'm just talking stuff to make it sort of neat and tidy. So I'm going to put this switch in. I do have a rack plan. I think I know where I'm putting it, or I'm pretty sure. I can screw it in and it'll be a good guide. Now there is my switch installed. Now I just want to mention one thing really quickly before I forget. This switch is not a native rack mount piece of equipment. It's a fully compatible piece of rack gear because it includes rack ears in the box, which are these bits that screw on the sides. But the equipment does not cover the entire 19-inch space. Now for any piece of gear like this, I will say that it is often handy to have a piece of full-size gear, or at least something else underneath it to support it, because no matter how tightly you do up the rack screws, they will wiggle. And this goes for microphone receivers and other things that don't completely occupy an entire 19-inch space. But the switch is not that heavy, so for now I'm fully happy with that until there are going to be other things in the rack to support it. So now of course the next step is to adjust the rack rails, now that that switch is actually putting these 2 rack strips as one, if that makes sense. You know, it's grouping them together so that I can't go far wrong. Now I've just tested, and my Phillips screwdriver, as it stands right now, does indeed fit. So it's a case of loosening these 4 screws and then sliding the whole structure to where I want it. There's one at the top, one at the bottom of each rack strip. So now folks, I should be able to grab this switch and whoa, okay. Now it's not going to be, okay, it's not going to be a smooth experience. Let's just loosen that a little more. Now a ratchet screwdriver is really coming in handy here folks. Right then, it's a case of getting these lined up. Something that I thought was going to be a little easier, but this is only something that you need to do once. So let's get these closer to the front. And I know exactly what the next step is. Where is it? Here we go. Get the Ethernet cable. Put it on top. Plug it in. Like that. And close the door. Okay, so right now, the door is just missing that cable, or just tapping it. So we're going to go back a shade. So it's a little bit of a struggle to line this up. So what I'm going to do, just to stop the bottom from unevenly spreading out, I'm going to mount a PDU that is going to be part of this system into the rack casing here. Now it's a little worse for wear. If I just bend that back slightly, that's looking okay. I don't want to put a bent piece of equipment in here because then that'll obviously defeat the object of putting this in here to help us out. But what I'm going to do is say 1, 2U for the PSU, and then 1U. That's going to go to the side. 1, 2U for the PSU here. Now this is going to be a little bit of a struggle, but we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay, folks. We're going to be okay. Now this video series is by no means a tutorial, but if anyone would like my advice when it comes to buying a rack mount power distribution unit for 13 amp sockets, I recommend buying extremely carefully. Now this particular one that I have, along with all of the other ones that I own, because I bought in bulk because I needed so many of them at the same time, although I actually got more than I ordered. I got a huge amount and I've given them away in all sorts. But anyway, that's a story for another day. When you're buying these, make sure you get them rated at 1U. This is taller than 1U, and all it does is create issues. It is slightly taller, even though you can screw it in both at top and bottom. As you can see, it overlaps at the top and it overlaps at the bottom. Extremely annoying, but we've only screwed it in here just to help us guide the rack into place. I believe eventually it's going to be completely down the bottom here, although I wasn't sure if my UPS was going down there, but I'll probably put this all the way to the bottom. Who knows? It can be wherever for now because the rack isn't going to be full, so it makes no real difference. So this is looking pretty damn good to me, folks. Really pleased so far. Now one thing that I didn't mention about this rack is there is space all the way along the sides and top and bottom. So what's brilliant is you do not need to leave cable management space in between the rack items themselves. You can fully utilise all rack units without worrying about where your cables are going to go. There's even space underneath, as you guys might be able to see in this frame. Let's bring you down a little bit. The rack actually finishes there, so there's loads of space for cables underneath. Same goes for the top and same goes for the side. So what I'm going to do now is mount my third, and at least for this little part of the video, my third and final piece of equipment into the box here, and that is something that is going to help us support that switch a little bit. That is my big beefy Raid. So this is going here, folks, and it's going to look sweet. Now I better not do that on camera because it's very heavy. I'm going to need to get myself in a good position. I recommend doing this with 2 people if you have 2 people. There we have it. My Raid enclosure is sitting in there with its drives installed. That'll be connected to my Mac Mini, as you guys know. A pretty nice piece of kit there that will hopefully be a lot quieter in this rack, but we'll soon find out. I've got visions of me pulling this out and attempting to replace the fans in it one day very soon. But for now, that is all of the rack mount gear that is going to be going into this rack. But I do need to wire it up and also get the actual internet into this rack. So I'm going to double check with Jess that she's not using the connection, and that way I can begin to get the router in here and show you guys what my plan is for that. Jess has just gone out, so there is no danger of me interrupting anyone using the internet. So what I can now comfortably do is unplug it. So there's my router, as you guys know, which has been working really well actually. Quite happy so far. Plugged into it at the moment, I've just got my Hackintosh, the power line adapter and my gaming PC. I'm just going to show you guys where the router is going to go, or at least where I hope it's going to fit in my rack plan. That is right there. And yes, it does indeed. Now, whether you like the look of that or not, man, the clearance is pretty much nothing. Hang on a sec. As you guys can see, minimal clearance there between the router and the top, so really, really lucky. I thought 2U would be enough for the router, and luckily it is. So there's that. Well, it's much more than 2U actually, before anyone thinks that the router fits in a 2U space. It's 2U plus all of the extra space they give you at the top, like I was describing earlier. So whether you think that looks good or not, because it's got a big hole out to the back of the rack, Yeah, not the greatest, but this is in here so that I can see the activity lights, which is important. Now, of course, in the last video, you guys saw me disable the Wi-Fi on this router completely, but a couple of people commented about me having my own access point in the office. So what I've done is I've reconfigured this router for my own personal access point, IMNC HQ Mark II, so it is now separate from Starship. I wouldn't have done that because I didn't think I needed to, but the signal was pretty weak on my iPad of all devices from the Airport Extreme. My phone was fine, but my iPad, it was suffering in here. So I decided to re-enable the wireless, reconfigure it as IMNC HQ, and of course it doesn't matter that it's going to be in the cabinet because the signal only has to cover this room. So any signal loss that I get from this being in the cabinet is absolutely fine. So this is now doing quite a lot. It's doing the job of my modem, router, and the office Wi-Fi access point. So yeah, that's going to be in there for the foreseeable future. Obviously, if I replace it with the Cisco router, then that will be able to be rack mounted up the top here, which will be a lot nicer looking. But at least the way this is now, I can see the activity lights, which is good. I was going to double-sided tape it down to the top of the switch, but I don't think there's any need. I think that'll stay there quite happily. Now, unfortunately, guys, this is where we start to slow down in our progression with the home network. This is about as far as I can go with the rack now, bar wiring it up, which we'll do in a minute, but I have a massive lack of the rest of the equipment that I need. So I bet you're all wondering what's going in this big expanse here. That'll all be revealed in the future, but of course UPS somewhere down here. I don't know whether it's going to be swapped with this or not, who knows. Then of course I'm going to have my NAS, my external drives that are all going to be hooked up and accessible via the network. Then I'm going to have my Mac Mini, and hopefully next to the Mac Mini on the same rack shelf, I'm hopefully eventually going to have some kind of cheap DVR unit with a nice drive in it that'll also be on the network, that I can use for my surveillance system. I'll be having surveillance within this office because there's quite a lot of expensive kit in here, and it's so cheap for me to implement, it could come in handy in the future. And I'm also going to have one camera outside, so hopefully 2 cameras in here covering the whole office, and 1 camera outside covering the garden and the shed, because I'll definitely need coverage on the shed. But that's to come in the future. I'm not expecting to do that until much later this year, so that's why the networking series is going to take so long. The cameras and whatnot are definitely going to be after the NAS, and the NAS is going to be quite far down the line. So what I'm going to do now, guys, is get everything wired up in here, temporarily of course, because we're going to for now be distributing power simply using this. Whereas eventually everything with IEC, including these two, are going to be powered directly off of the UPS via just IEC to IEC leads. So I'm going to get wiring up and be back with you in a tick. Folks, I'm not 100% sure what I've done. Holy crap. It's telling me that I got no internet now, and that's kind of weird because it has been working tremendously. So I have no idea why I've suddenly got no internet. It's actually freaking me out a little bit now because of just trying to think why it could be doing that. Bollocks. So I'm not sure what's going on here. The router's resetting at the moment. There are so many variables to take into consideration. All I did was unplug the router and plug it back in. The configuration's not changed whatsoever, and it's telling me that there is no internet connection. So because my connection is really new, they said that there could be some up and downs, but it's been flawless. So it seems a massive coincidence that when I go and faff around and unplug the router, it seems a big coincidence that the connection goes down then. But yeah, it's telling me that I have no internet. It's telling me that I'm not connected to it. So what I'm going to have to do is move the router down to the phone socket, plug it directly in, and see where we get there. Because if we get internet there, then that means that something has happened to my cable, which is weird. But I guess possible, I don't know. It's Cat 6, it's pretty strong. Something could have happened to the RJ11 end. If I plug it into the phone socket down there and it's still not working, then I'm pretty much guaranteed that the internet itself is down, but I need to delve into this a little more. So, video on hold for the moment. We're just getting our rack all sorted up and we've got a bit of internet problems, so that's not good. But I'm actually a little bit shitting myself because it's taken me so long to get a connection. Then I get it, it's absolutely flawless. Then I fiddle and it's effed up. So yeah, that's really kind of annoying. Okay, so it's not connecting down here either, which I'm glad about. Well, mixture of glad and not glad really, because I want to know why my friggin' internet's not connecting, but I'm glad I haven't done anything to that cable. So I can take all this back up, put it back in the rack, and then start to troubleshoot it in there. Thank God we are back online. But I've got another problem, believe it or not, but this isn't a big deal. This is just my carelessness in planning. I've gone and done all this, plugged all this in here, but then I just realised that my Hackintosh is over there and I don't think that yellow Ethernet cable is long enough, which is a bummer, a massive bummer. So yeah, let's see if it reaches. Okay, starting to get suspicious now. Just pushed the rack back into its position and there's connection problems. Second annoying thing is the yellow Ethernet cable is not long enough. I've had to move the power line adapter onto an extension lead, which it's not going to be happy about, but it should work all right. Just so I can use the built-in switch to access the internet on my power hack for now. So I've got the gaming PC plugged in there as well because I thought there was no point going to any extra effort to pull it through the back right now. But this is suspicious. Pushed my rack back and then I lost internet. Oh, weird. We can now continue with the video. I'm still getting to know my router, guys. I'm still getting to know my connection. It turns out I just needed to wait it out on that orange light. It takes a serious long time to reconnect. But looks like we're there, which is sweet. I don't know why it disconnected when I moved the rack back, but as long as the internet's there now, I'm not going to think about it until the next time it drops out. So let me just quickly take you through everything that I've done. As you can see, I have my switch hooked up. Now the only two things I have connected to my switch at the moment are the router and the power line adapter, making the entire switch redundant. However, this is going to be built from here and just built up and up and up and up. So I may as well have it connected at the beginning, plus it's in the rack. So the reason that I only have my switch connected is because I've got to split internet to my system, and I've done a speed test, it's fine. I've got to split internet to my system, which is on this shorter Ethernet cable. They're all too short because it's all the way over there. I need to get a longer cable. But then this is the gaming PC, and obviously this is connecting it to the gigabit switch. It's also a power line on this extension lead, so I need to get ordering today. I really do, but funds are limited, so I'll be limited on what I can get in at the moment, but I should be able to get some new cables and things like that this side of doing the video, if that makes any sense. And maybe I'll look for a rack shelf to get the Mac Mini started and to get a few exciting things like that happening. But maybe it's going to be a little while until we get a UPS in here. I've just got to sell mine and get the cash for it, and then I can be able to I can get another one with that cash. But anyway, in terms of wiring, all we've got out the back, dead simple, is the internet coming in. That's the white one, and we've got the Ethernet plugged in for the power line, and then down here we got power coming in. Dead simple. So that is all we can do with the rack today. Let's close her up, and as you guys can see, that lovely smoked door means that we can still see everything, but it's not too bright. So there it is, the beginnings of my rack. As you can see, by the way, I've routed the power cables down the side of the rack rail now, which is how I want to keep things. I want to keep things in order. Really, I should have routed these Ethernet cables out here, which is something I may quickly do actually. There we have it, the birth of my rack. Oh man, this is exciting. This is really exciting stuff. So obviously you guys are lucky enough to be able to watch whatever happens right now, but for me, I've got a painful wait to wait for some more gear to play with. I'll try and get stuff as quick as I can. I'll really try, but it's going to be a painful wait for me. So yeah, see you in a couple of seconds, but for me, probably a couple of days. When I said in the last clip that it was going to be a tough wait, I didn't know it was going to be that tough. Since the last clip, it's been a few days, and not only have I been waiting for delivery for cables, that hasn't really bothered me. I had an awful stomach bug. So yeah, kind of weird what can happen in the middle of filming an episode like this. But yeah, I am now pretty much fully recovered and feeling ready to tackle my network. So let's dive straight in. Firstly, you guys can see that I've brought down my Mac Mini. I needed to go up the other place today to grab a few things. And yeah, this little guy is looking a bit worse for wear, but it's still a very capable machine. Now, just really quickly on the Mac Mini then, we'll talk about it more when we actually integrate it into the rack properly. But this is the 2007 1.83 gigahertz Mac Mini, and it's got the 2 gigs of RAM, and I put a 500 gig drive in it. The reason I put that in is because I had it lying around and I thought it would be a handy sort of dumping ground, which it has. It's proven to be really handy actually. But it will be upgraded. Now, I was kind of hoping to upgrade it prior to putting the rack together, but unfortunately that's not going to be the case. What do I want to upgrade it to? I want to upgrade it to a 2009 Mac Mini if I can. 2.26 gigahertz or a 2.53 gigahertz Mac Mini. A few benefits. One of them is FireWire 800, so I'll get double the bandwidth to all of my external disks because my external RAID and my external hard drives are FireWire. At the moment I've got to use 400, which is absolutely fine, but because I'm going to be hosting my iTunes library from this server, then I would really like to have the library accessible by multiple people without any lag. And FireWire 400, not really that great. For instance, if Jess is streaming a movie downstairs, I'm not 100% sure it may fully cope with it. I'm not too sure. I haven't tested it, but obviously I'll have music playback and everything up here. You know, maybe maximum 3 locations, accessing 3 different files at a time. But anyway, that's by the by. The other reason being is because I want to host the actual iTunes library itself on the machine, and for the latest version of iTunes you need the latest version of OS X or at least Mavericks or Yosemite, I believe. So yeah, this machine is maxed out at Lion, plus Lion is dropping support daily, so obviously security updates and that are going to come to an end. And I just need an upgrade for a machine that stays on 24 hours a day. I don't want it to be vulnerable in any way, and I don't want it to be out of date. And it's very handy for me to have a Mac on the network. I find it extremely useful. So yeah, that upgrade is to come. You can get them for about 150 quid if you try. I might be able to see if I can get one without a hard drive or something and get it really cheap. Who knows? I'm going to keep my ears peeled, but I don't have the money for the upgrade at the moment. So for the foreseeable future, the very capable 2007 Mac Mini, which was a donation a very long time ago, by the way, folks, which I'm still extremely grateful for. It'll be going into the rack, and when this is retired from the rack, I really hope that I can find an awesome use for it because I love the machine. Anyway, there's the Mini and its power supply, both of which need a little wipe over, so I'll do that before putting them in the rack. Of course, they're a bit grubby. They've been on my setup for a long time now. Next up, we have some cabling. As you guys can see, quite a varied colour selection, but you know, why the heck not? First up, we have 5 1-meter orange Cat6 cables. This is rack interconnectivity, so anything within the rack, so short runs from the switch to the router, from the switch to the server, that sort of thing. The colour coding is basically, for me at least, per length at the moment. I know that's not the way that lots of people do it. You know, normally colour coding on cables is for different subnets or to a specific bit of equipment or something like that. But for me at the moment, it's just to determine where the cables are going. So for instance, these other cables, this pink one here is a 5 meter. This will be running to the main setup. But if I pan up for a second, you guys can see that I actually have a second pink one. You might be able to see it just in the corner of the frame there, that I've already unwrapped and ran to the main setup. I was just testing length, and 5 meters is enough, thank God. So I will be running 2 Ethernet cables. Why am I going to run 2 Ethernets to the main setup? Well, first of all, I thought it would be handy just in case I want a wired network for something else on that setup one day. But more importantly is if I can ever get the internal USB 3.0 to work on my Hackintosh, and I hope I can with the next OS or whatever. I'm not going to go fiddling now, but if I can, then I would absolutely love to replace my USB 3.0 card with another network card. That way I can do some LAN teaming and hopefully get a bit of a quicker transfer between the system, the server rack and my main system. Gigabit is already blazing, but I would like as much speed as possible by the time the NAS is built. The NAS will have teamed network to the switch, so I'd like to be able to access the NAS to the best of my abilities with a little bit more than gigabit speed. So that's why I'm going to be running 2 Ethernet cables. Then we have the blue ones. The blue ones are basically everything else within the office. So they're 3 meters in length. They're going to be running to the test setup, the gaming PC, the power line adapter. They're basically replacing the black Ethernet cables that are here now, because of course the black ones are for the entertainment setup, as you guys know. But I don't have the Apple TV yet, and I don't have an Ethernet adapter for my Wii U, so that is why I don't have those two hooked up at the moment. That's why the black cables are free. So what I'm going to do is pull out the rack, folks, and we are going to start wiring up the rack. We're basically going to rewire the whole thing, use Velcro ties, and also get the Mac Mini hooked up in there. By the way, I have ordered a 2U shelf for the Mac Mini to sit underneath the RAID, but unfortunately that hasn't arrived yet. Hopefully it'll arrive pretty soon. So for now it's going to be a bit of a bodge setup, but yeah, I was hoping it would arrive. Unfortunately it didn't. Maybe tomorrow. So let's pull out the rack and take a look. So for this bit, I'm not actually going to pull the rack out 100% like I did last time, because there's no need now that I've done the basics. Plus, I don't think I'm going to have enough length on all of the cables, just looking at these ones and stuff. So what I'm going to do is quickly put the power line adapter where it's meant to be. Then I'm going to plug the rack itself into the power line adapter. By the way, someone commented about that. The power line adapter has a direct 13 amp pass through, so it is totally 100% safe, especially with the power draw of this setup. But yeah, I'm going to do that. Then I'm going to push it back to nearly its position, just out enough so that I can feed cables out, etc. So here we are at the switch. Now what I'm going to do, the reason that's blinking now is because I've just powered it down, obviously, to plug the power line adapter back in. What I'm basically going to do is hook all of this up. So right now, what have we got going here? Let's take a little look. Well, these black ones are totally redundant anyway, so let's get rid of the black ones because we don't need them anymore, and then we'll start wiring in the new ones. So I've got this pink one ready. The pink ones, in my opinion, folks, are extremely entertaining. Definitely a great laugh. So let's get rid of that Ethernet cable. And that's been coming from the router. So it'll be nice to have a shorter patch for that one. There we go, bye-bye. By the way, folks, these are all Cat 6, nice quality with the little metal bits on them. I don't know if I mentioned that. They're decent enough. You can get them on Amazon. If anyone cares, feel free to ask or whatever. But yeah, what I'm going to do while I'm back here is just grab one of the short patch leads. So that way I can patch in the internet quickly to the switch, just so I can get things back up and running for Jess, just in case she wants to use the internet. Don't want any downtime. And I'm actually going to patch the internet into the very last port on the switch, because if there's anything that's going to be important to troubleshoot, it will be the internet. The very last port on our switch. Now, don't worry folks, we will tidy all of this up at the end, but for now we're just doing it really roughly. So there's another black one that we want to get rid of there. So that's the old cabling out of the way. Now what I'm going to quickly do again to get the internet up and running is just get one of these blue ones, and I'm going to patch it into the power line adapter, just so that we have some internet going to our wireless access point downstairs. So what I'm going to do, just so I remember, is the power line is always going to be there, at least for now, because I don't think the power line, even though it's got 3 gigabit ports on it, I don't think it can benefit from having any more than one connected. Although it is rated for 1200 megabit, I still don't think that's the case. That must be just like an advertising claim or something. But if anyone knows differently about those 3-port TP-Link gigabit power line adapters, then I will connect 2 if it will make a difference. In fact, I could try it really, but I don't know if it would be a waste of time. But anyway, there we go. That's the power line adapter connected. Now we can take our time and connect everything else. So what I think I'm going to do is pretty much, you can see that pink one there, because I want all the length I can get from the pink ones to go over to the main setup, I think the pinks can be on port 1 and 2 there. I don't see why not. And then what I'll do is I'll have all of the rack in the middle section here. Now, you may be thinking, hang on a minute, Tom, why aren't you labelling your cables? You're setting up a brand new network, why aren't you labelling them? Well, if I set it up in such a way that I remember what things are, then maybe I'll remember, and that'll be pretty good. If not, then it's no big deal, because there are so little cables that troubleshooting won't take that long. And also, labelling machines, which is the way I'd want to do it, are about 20 quid, and I'd rather spend that 20 quid on things for the actual network. So hopefully that answers a few of those questions. Port 1 and 2 go into the main setup, but this one I've routed stupidly not around the back there, so this should come round. I've been forgetting to route things behind the rear rack rails, guys, so if I ever wanted to mount something there, then that would have been a bit of a challenge. So there we have it. There's the main setup, hooked up and ready to rock and roll. Looking pretty sweet. So guys, I've just made a couple of changes. I've routed all of the power cables behind the rear rack rails as well. Just keeps everything neat. It will be neater than this eventually. Yeah, it's just kind of really difficult to incorporate good cable management when half of the equipment that you're going to be using isn't present. The other thing that I've done is I've changed the I've decided to bring the pink ones in through the bottom hole because there isn't that much spare length on them. I thought because they're going to be running along the floor, it would make a lot more sense to have them closer to the ground. So yeah, what I'm going to now do is plug in all of the other Ethernet cables because you guys don't need to watch me plugging in Ethernet cables, I guess. Then I'll talk you through what I've done, and it'll be quite exciting then because it'll really start to take shape in here. Ah, what a sweet, sweet sight. That is looking good. I'm very happy with that. So yeah, what have we got going? We've got, obviously, these are probably some of the most obvious ones. These are for all of the inside the rack things. So we got 4 here, obviously loads of room to expand in the future. Mac Mini, number 1. 2 and 3 is going to be the teamed NAS once I build it, and number 3 is going to be some form of just cheapo DVR like I was explaining earlier in the video, or in the previous video, or whenever it was, just for a few cameras, nothing major, but just so I can see them online. And on the network, more importantly, because this will be a headless, everything in here will be headless, obviously. What else do we have? We've got these 4 here. These 4 are going in a nice snake back there, snaking along over there, out the back, and into a pile of mess behind the rack at the moment, but they will be dedicated to the test bench setup. I think 4 is plenty. One day what I'll probably do is chop all the ends off, get a 4-way patch box for the top of the desk, or a couple of sockets or something, and punch all of these blue ones into their own respective sockets. But right now, just to save money on Ethernet cables, I'll be plugging these directly into the equipment. But one day they'll be going into some kind of patch panel, patch system. Same goes for these really. One day I would like to have some kind of Ethernet plug system over there, so a 2-way Ethernet patch or something like that, or a socket. Socket on the skirting board, something like that, whatever it'll be. But for now it's just going to be running straight into the system. So as you guys know, one of these isn't going to be used at the moment because obviously I've got a single Ethernet port on my Hackintosh. Now in terms of cable management, we've just got Velcro ties. You guys will be pleased to know that I've used Velcro ties, but I've used normal cable ties to actually hold them to the rack through the center here. Reason I've done that is because you will not get a Velcro through that hole. That's not really an advised method anyway, but it's just because for me at the moment, because I'm going to be plugging equipment directly into these, I need some strain relief for the switch, because obviously there isn't strain relief anywhere else. I could just keep yanking and it could pull tension on the cable. So having proper cable ties here for now is quite a good idea, I think. You know, and like I said in my desk video, I really don't mind them. People seem to be loving the Velcro ones lately, and yeah, they're great, but you can't beat a good old-fashioned proper cable tie. So now, folks, I'm going to spend a little bit of time tidying the cables at the back, and I'm also going to run cables for the printer down into this rack, USB to go into the Mac Mini, and power to go into the power strip, because of course Now that I have the Mac Mini down here, the printer can happily go on the network. Awesome progress, guys, awesome progress. I have plugged in the RAID to power. I've also run Firewire daisy chain between the hard drive and the RAID, and a little tail ready to plug into the Mac Mini. USB is ran from the printer ready to plug into the Mac Mini, and the RAID and printer and external hard drive are all plugged into power. So you can see one free power socket, and that is for our little friend here. First, we'll plug in the Firewire 400. Let's go into an 800 adapter up by the RAID there, which is then going 800 daisy chain to the external hard drive. Then we have USB for the printer, so that is that. Then we have network, hey, in there, check that out. And of course, we need some juice for this guy. So plug the power in. That is the Mac Mini ready to go for now. Of course, there is a lot more to plug into that, but the reason I can't set up any more hard drives or whatever is because I don't have enough power in the rack itself at the moment, as you guys know. Because the reason that this PDU is so full is because half of the stuff that's in it will be able to be directly powered from the UPS. Things that rely on IEC, such as the switch and the RAID, and also the printer. So yeah, that's something, but let's plug in the main juice to the Mini. Let's get this wrapped around here. I'm not going to do anything in terms of cable management for the rest of this stuff, guys, because it's just not worth it. As you guys know, I'm waiting for a rack shelf, so it's all going to be unplugged and replugged in then. But what this allows me to do, now that I get this Mac Mini plugged in, and obviously it's booted up automatically, it's set to boot up automatically. Let's power up the RAID. Here we go. Up a little bit. Power that up. There we go. What this allows me to do, folks, is actually use the rack as a server rack. So yeah, wow, I'm excited. Everything's plugged in, we're ready to go. I can shut the door and actually go over to my system and see if everything's working. So we are up and running, which I am really pleased about, guys. This is of course my Mac Mini desktop running on my main system over the network, everything running absolutely flawlessly. This little dialogue here is just the printer driver installing, because obviously it's detected the printer because it's plugged in. And of course you can see there on the desktop that both of the drives are mounted. The RAID 5 enclosure, which is 900 gigs under RAID, 1.2 not under RAID, so there's 4 300 gig drives in there, which I'll hope to upgrade, but no need for an upgrade yet. I'll explain about that in a minute. And then the other disk is, of course, if I just go over here, and we're in network now. If I go to Neptune, you can see both of the disks are visible absolutely fine. There will be the rest of the external hard drives hooked up eventually, of course, but this one is scratch clone apparently. I am very confused as to what all of my hard drives are, but I know this one is a 2 terabyte drive in size. It's completely full, so what I need to do is check that I have all of this stuff archived and then reformat this drive and repurpose it for something else, because we have all sorts in here, all sorts. Just whoa, just loads and loads of videos. But yeah, we'll see how everything goes. What was I going to say then? What was the next thing I was going to say? Oh yeah, the drives. The reason I don't have to upgrade the drives in Monster RAID yet is because, as you guys know, at the moment for my iTunes drive, I have this guy. Now, the reason that I like to have my iTunes drive on an external portable 2.5-inch drive, and it's something that I've only done since building the Hackintosh, by the way, it's so handy because I can unplug this from the computer, throw it in my bag, and then wherever I go, I turn up with a fully fledged iTunes library, including all of my movies, TV shows, because my iTunes library in total right now, I believe, is about 600 and something gigabytes, and that is going to grow very slowly because it's rare these days that I get films and TV shows. I don't even think, it might not even be quite 600 gig, that's just a figure that's popping into my head, but it may be even less than that. So what the plan is to keep this drive as my iTunes drive, but it's going to be a clone of another iTunes drive, so it's still fully able to be unplugged and taken with me anywhere. But what I'm going to do is host the library on the RAID, which is going to be pretty fun. So it'll be much quicker to access, and it'll have another state of redundancy, being RAID 5 of course. It'll be connected via FireWire to the Mac Mini, much quicker than that 2.5-inch drive via USB. Then of course, what will happen is, I keep saying of course, apologies for that, I will have that little drive connected to my Mac Mini as well. It'll do a nightly clone of the RAID. Therefore, if I want to take any of my iTunes stuff anywhere, or my entire iTunes library with me to plug into my laptop or whatever, I just unplug that drive, because hopefully what I will do eventually is get the Belkin USB splitter for the Mac Mini, the USB hub. That way it has a front USB as well. That way I just unplug the drive, take it off the shelf, because this Mac Mini is going to be on a rack shelf, and take it with me. And the 2.5-inch drive will just sit in the rack being cloned to, which is pretty awesome, I think. I'm quite looking forward to that. I'll always have everything I need with me. I just take that drive with me. Fantastic. And it could stay away from the rack for a long time. It makes no difference because it's going to be cloned, obviously. It could stay away for weeks and weeks, and then I think, I haven't plugged in the drive in a while. Plug it in, it'll clone, job done, and no other system has to be switched on. So yeah, I'll have no iTunes drive physically connected to this system anymore, which will be a first for me, hosting the iTunes completely over the network. But it's very handy considering I have my own house now, you know, for the Apple TV and the network in general. It's very handy. Right then, I'm talking a bit too much. Let's test this printer. So I've got a Pages document here. I've just written printer test on the top of it. Let's Command P and see if she prints. Print. I hope it will. It'd be really handy if it does. Can't hear any noise behind me. Hello, printer. Hello. Idiot. I selected Canon as if it was connected directly to my computer. I forgot about the @Neptune bit. So yeah, let's go. Rock and roll. Nothing? Anything? Hey. Now we're talking. Come on, printer. Oh crap, I haven't opened its mouth, look. Printer's working. Excellent. Another thing ticked off the list. So there is the rack pushed back into its place. That's how it looks with the printer on top and everything. If anyone's curious, the printer is literally, obviously, just the two cables from it are going straight into the back in that top hole there. One really frustrating thing about this printer is the fact that the connections are on the side, so they actually protrude quite a bit more than the actual size of the printer. So that's power and USB. But luckily on this particular setup it makes no difference. It was a pain in the ass before, but now the printer has plenty of room to breathe and print. So yeah, that's that. I got a little bit more work to do on strain relief for the internet cable, the incoming internet cable, the nice big beefy one. But what I'll probably do is trim that down at the same time. Just trim it down a little bit because there's a good 4 or 5 meters bunched up behind the rack. Because at the moment, if I move that cable, it can pull on the router because that cable is going directly out the back. That needs to be routed behind the rear rails as well. Obviously, these 3 orange leads aren't staying there. They'll be tidied up. But I'm really pleased, guys. So here I have the 4 cables for the test bench setup. One will pretty much be permanently in the gaming PC if the gaming PC stays in here. And then I have 3 spare, which is not overkill. If anyone thinks that may be overkill, it really isn't, because one will be for the actual test bench setup, and one will be for whatever I'm working on over the other side. So that could be a laptop or whatever. I always go wired, guys. Any updates or whatever, it's just so much better. Or I suppose I've got the latest in the old Wi-Fi these days, so that would be pretty good as well. But yeah, I just go for wired anyway. And of course, I can be working on multiple projects at one time. So yeah, I won't need to swap any Ethernet cables. If anyone was wondering what I was talking about in terms of patching these eventually, what I mean is just chopping off all the ends here and then getting a nice box that sits on top of the desk. Nice little, you can get them. I've seen them in 8-way. I don't know if you can get them smaller. I hope you can. Just like a 4-way Ethernet patch panel, just a little metal box where you can just punch in your Ethernet cables in the back, and then you've got 4 ports on the desk. I'll probably do that underneath the desk in the cable management bit or something. I don't know, we'll have to see about that. So what I'm going to do is basically leave it there for today, guys. I've got a lot of tidying up to do. As you can see, I've made a mess once again, but I will yeah, this video is not over because the rack shelf is on the way, the 2U rack shelf for the Mac Mini, so that's extremely exciting. But for now, that's me signing out. Hopefully the rack shelf will arrive tomorrow. Yeah, and then we can get everything sort of sorted for now, at least for this sort of stage 1 of the network setup. It is the next day and I have a package, which is good because there is only one thing that this could be. It has got to be my rack shelf, which means that we will be able to finish stage 1 of the rack video, which is great. So it includes fixings, which is nice. This was the cheapest 2U rack shelf on eBay. The cheapest, because it's getting to the point where I am not allowing myself to spend any more substantial cash on these projects right now. So yeah, let's unwrap it and see what you get for next to nothing in terms of this kind of gear. So there we have it. 2U rack shelf. It's a little bit vented. You can get them more perforated than this, but I mean, you know, that is absolutely fine. Yeah, it looks great. 2U is plenty big enough for a Mac Mini. Of course, the new Mac Minis will fit in a single U space, which is really cool. When I say new Mac Minis, I mean the 2010 and above, so for the last 6 years. But yeah, 2U shelf be really handy for hard drives in the Mac Mini, and you don't have to necessarily get a shelf the same size as the amount of rack units that something takes up, but it does look cleaner in my opinion because you don't have any gaps along the sides then. So yeah, let's fit this in and see what it looks like. So one thing I will say about this is it's a lot louder than I thought it was going to be. I need to look into this and change the fans. I really do. And I need to know as well how much of a priority the fans actually are, because the unit itself, it doesn't really get hot. But I think as well as the fans being loud in themselves, I think the bearing is going in one because it's making an awful racket, like a sort of rough sounding racket. So I would love to change the fans in that to make it a bit quieter. It's the only piece of hardware in the rack at the moment that has any sort of noise to it. Obviously, the Mac Mini has a fan, but they're very quiet, even when they reach quite high temperatures. And the switch is fanless, and so is the router. So yeah, it's literally the only thing. Now, if I can get into this little bag of fixings that they gave me, I can use these because I may as well, considering they were included. So here she goes. Oh yes, this is gonna look sweet, guys. Really sweet. There we have it. Absolutely solid, guys. Absolutely solid, not going anywhere. So let's attempt to just plonk the Mac Mini onto the shelf without unplugging it. Let's see if we can get away with that. Oh, right then. Come on. Ah, that was much more successful than I thought it was going to be. Check that out. There's the Mac Mini itself. Then let's bring up a drive, of course. Oh, and that drive is actually the wrong way around for the display. Not that I ever know what the heck the display says, to be perfectly honest. There's that there. That's it, videos 09 it says for some reason. No idea why it says that. But yeah, I can only fit one drive on that shelf. That's okay, because the plan is to stack up the other drives on the shelf below. And then of course this leaves space, that's right, this was the plan. This leaves space to put that portable iTunes drive that I was talking about there. And then of course once I get that Belkin USB hub that'll sit on the Mac Mini, it'll plug in the front, which will be absolutely fine. So, wow. Yeah, I'm really happy with that, guys. Like, seriously, really happy. So here it is. this is how it's looking, and this is how it's going to stay for quite a while. Now, of course, at this stage of the game, this is overkill. The rack itself and, you know, the setup, it's overkill for the equipment that I have. It's pretty much the same equipment as I had on my old server shelf, as you guys know. But what this allows is total expansion in the future, and all of the blank space is going to be taken up by the new UPS, which will hopefully go down here, and, well, when I find one, and the 5U shelf that'll hold the NAS build, which will be the sort of heart of the rack, if you like. The one thing that I am going to fiddle with is the fans for this guy. As you can probably hear them on camera, way louder than anything I'd like. It really does disturb. Even with the door shut, it's surprisingly loud. And I want this to be quiet, because there's no, you know, actual rack mount servers in here. There's no piece of gear that really has an excuse to make a lot of noise. It can quite easily be a really quiet setup, and because it's in an environment where I'll be filming and stuff, noise level is something that I want to keep an eye on. So the NAS build is going to be quiet. The Mac Mini is you know, silent. I need this guy to really shut up, because at the end of the day, it's just a glorified external hard drive, you know, and it's got 900 gigs of storage. It's nothing special. You know, it's a RAID system, so it's got that extra layer of redundancy, and it's a bit speedier. But other than that, I don't see any reason for it to need that amount of racket. So I'm going to look into that, see if I can get some replacement fans, or maybe slow the fans down or something. I have no idea. I'm also going to keep an eye on the overall temperature of the rack, make sure everything's okay with the door shut. I don't want anything bursting into flames when I'm not here. But other than that, that is this setup. So let's step back, take a look. Yeah, we're looking sweet, guys. Give me your feedback down in the comments section. Let me know what you think. I know it's early days, but I hope everyone looks forward to the next part. I know I'm looking forward to the next part as the funds roll in and I can start spending money on the NAS. You'll of course probably see the NAS build before the next networking setup video. So thank you very much for coming along with me on this journey, and I will see you in the next video.